The bank teller passed me $5,000 in cash that wasn't mine and said, "Just take it and leave." Her hands were shaking as she slid the stack of hundreds across the counter, her eyes darting toward the security cameras overhead before settling back on me with desperate intensity. I'd come in to deposit my paycheck, a routine Tuesday morning errand that should have taken 5 minutes. Now I was standing at window 3 with $5,000 I didn't ask for, and a woman I'd never met before looking at me like I was her last chance at something. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, pushing the money back toward her. "I'm just here to deposit this check for $847. She didn't touch the cash. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Please, I know how this looks, but you need to trust me right now. Take the money, walk out of this bank, and don't come back here for at least 3 days." My first thought was that she was trying to set me up for theft, some kind of elaborate scam where she'd claim I robbed her, and I'd end up on security footage walking out with money that wasn't mine. But her expression wasn't scheming or manipulative, it was terrified. Behind me, I heard the soft ding of the entrance door, and the teller's face went completely white. "He's here," she breathed. "Please, just go. Take it." I turned to see who'd walked in, expecting some intimidating figure, but it was just a middle-aged man in a business suit carrying a leather briefcase. He looked like every other professional who came through here during lunch hour. He smiled politely at the security guard, waved at another teller, and got in line behind me. Nothing threatening about him at all. When I looked back at the teller, she'd already turned to her computer, typing rapidly with trembling fingers. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" she asked loudly, her professional voice completely different from the desperate whisper she'd used seconds ago. I stood there frozen, the $5,000 still sitting on the counter between us, trying to understand what was happening. The man in the suit was now directly behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody. "Everything okay up there, Alicia?" he called to the teller. She smiled brightly, but I noticed sweat beading on her forehead despite the bank's aggressive air conditioning. "Just fine, Mr. Garrett. This customer was asking about our savings account options." Mr. Garrett nodded approvingly and checked his phone. The teller, Alicia, looked at me with eyes that were begging me to play along. I'd never been good at reading situations like this, never been the person who picked up on subtle social cues or knew when something was seriously wrong. But something about the way she was looking at me, the way her left hand was pressed flat against her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together, made me make a split-second decision that would change everything. I picked up the money and put it in my jacket pocket. "Thank you for your help with the savings account information," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly normal despite my heart hammering. "I'll think about it and come back another time." Alicia's shoulders sagged with relief so visible that Mr. Garrett stepped forward, concerned. "Are you feeling all right, Alicia? You look pale." She laughed it off, said something about not eating breakfast, and he offered to have someone cover her window so she could take a break. She declined quickly, maybe too quickly, and I took that as my cue to leave. I walked toward the exit on legs that felt disconnected from my body, half expecting security to tackle me before I reached the door, but nothing happened. I pushed through the glass doors into the October sunlight, and the cool air hit my face like a wake-up call. I had just walked out of First National Bank with $5,000 that didn't belong to me, and I had absolutely no idea why. I made it to my car before my hands started shaking hard enough that I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock the door. Once inside, I pulled the money out of my pocket and counted it again. Exactly 50 $100 bills, brand new, in sequential serial numbers. Tucked between the first and second bill was a small folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully. An address was written in neat handwriting with tomorrow's date and a time written underneath. 2247 Riverside Drive. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. That was it. No explanation, no name, nothing else. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at that address and trying to decide what to do. The logical thing would be to walk back in there and return the money, explain that there'd been some kind of misunderstanding, but Alicia's face kept flashing through my mind, the genuine fear in her eyes when that Mr. Garrett had walked in. Whatever was happening here was bigger than a simple bank error. I Googled the address on my phone. It was a self-storage facility on the industrial side of town, the kind of place with those orange roll-up doors and 24-hour access codes. I'd driven past it 100 times without ever really noticing it was there. Now someone wanted me to go there tomorrow at 7 p.m., and they'd given me $5,000 as incentive or payment or insurance. I still couldn't tell which. I drove home in a daze, the money burning a hole in my jacket pocket. My apartment was a studio in a converted house, small but clean, the kind of place a 26-year-old graphic designer could afford on freelance income. I locked my door, closed all the blinds, and spread the cash out on my kitchen table. It was more money than I'd ever held at one time. My rent was $850. My student loan payment was $340. My car insurance was $95. This money could solve every immediate financial stress I had, but I knew I couldn't spend it. Whatever this was, it wasn't a gift. I picked up my phone to call the police, then stopped. What would I even say? A bank teller gave me $5,000 and told me to leave? They'd think I robbed the bank. The security footage would show me walking out with money, and Alicia would probably deny the whole thing to protect herself from whatever she was protecting herself from. I'd be the one in handcuffs trying to explain a story that sounded insane. I put my phone down and made coffee instead, my third cup of the day, though it was barely noon. I needed to think clearly. Someone had gone to significant trouble to get me this money and get me to that address tomorrow. The question was, why me? I wasn't important. I had no connections to banks or finance or anything that would make me valuable in some kind of scheme. I was just a random customer who'd come in to deposit a paycheck at the wrong time. Or maybe the right time, depending on whose perspective you took. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. Thank you for helping Alicia. She'll explain everything tomorrow. Don't go to the police. I stared at the text, my coffee going cold in my hand. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I'd taken the money and left the bank. Someone knew I was home right now. Probably knew I'd been sitting here for the past hour trying to figure out what to do. I went to my window and looked out at the street. A blue sedan was parked 3 houses down, engine running, someone sitting in the driver's seat. As soon as I appeared at the window, the car pulled away, not speeding, just leaving casually like they'd gotten what they wanted. I let the blinds fall closed and sat back down at the kitchen table, surrounded by $5,000 in cash and more questions than answers. The rest of that day passed in a blur. I tried to work on a logo design for a client, but I couldn't focus. I tried to watch TV, but nothing held my attention. I kept picking up the money, counting it again, reading the address over and over like it would suddenly make sense. By evening, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just a confused bank teller who'd made a massive error and was too scared to admit it. Maybe the address was where she wanted to meet to get the money back without involving her supervisors. Maybe Mr. Garrett was her boss, who she was afraid of for normal workplace reasons. Maybe I was building this up into something bigger than it was, because my life had been so boring for so long that I wanted drama. But then I Googled Alicia's name combined with the bank name. What I found made my stomach drop. Alicia Westbrook, 34 years old, had been working at First National Bank for 6 years. 3 months ago, her husband, Kevin Westbrook, had died in what the news articles called a tragic accident at his workplace. He'd been a construction site manager, and apparently, some equipment had malfunctioned, and he'd been killed instantly. The articles mentioned that OSHA was investigating, that the company expressed deep condolences, that Alicia was left behind with 2 young children. I kept reading, going deeper into the story. Kevin's death had been ruled accidental, but there was one article from a local investigative journalist suggesting that there had been safety violations at the construction site that the company had known about. The article mentioned that Kevin had filed 3 separate safety complaints in the weeks before his death. It mentioned that those complaints had been ignored. It mentioned that the equipment that killed him had been flagged for maintenance 2 months earlier. And then I found the connection. The construction company that Kevin had worked for, Garrett Development Corporation, owned and operated by the Garrett family, who had been prominent in our city's business community for 3 generations. I pulled up the company's website and clicked on the About Us page. There was a photo of the leadership team, and my blood went cold. Second from the left was Mr. Garrett, the man who'd walked into the bank today. His full name was Dylan Garrett, Vice President of Operations at Garrett Development Corporation. The man Alicia had been terrified of, the man whose presence had made her go pale and shaky. Now the pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made me sick. Kevin Westbrook dies in an accident at a Garrett Development construction site. 3 months later, his widow is working at a bank when Dylan Garrett, a VP from that same company, comes in regularly, and she's scared enough of him to hand $5,000 to a complete stranger and beg them to leave. I spent the rest of the night falling down internet rabbit holes, finding out everything I could about the Garrett family and their construction company. They were worth millions, had built half the commercial real estate in the city over the past 20 years, and had remarkably few lawsuits considering the size of their operation. But when I dug deeper into public records, I found something interesting. There had been 3 workplace deaths at Garrett Development sites in the past 5 years, all ruled accidental, all involving equipment malfunctions, all after the workers involved had filed safety complaints. The families had all settled quietly out of court for undisclosed amounts, except Kevin Westbrook's family. According to court records I found through some aggressive Googling, Alicia Westbrook had refused to sign a settlement agreement. She'd hired a lawyer and was pursuing a wrongful death lawsuit against Garrett Development. The case was scheduled to go to trial in 6 weeks. I sat back from my laptop, the full picture finally becoming clear. Alicia wasn't just scared of Dylan Garrett because he was associated with her husband's death. She was scared because she was actively suing his family's company and he was showing up at her workplace. That was intimidation, maybe harassment. And somehow, I'd become involved in whatever was happening between them. The $5,000, the address, tomorrow's meeting, it was all connected to this lawsuit. I just didn't know how yet. I tried to sleep that night but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alicia's terrified face, heard her desperate whisper begging me to just take the money and leave. At 3 a.m., I got out of bed and counted the cash again, like it would be different this time. Still $5,000, still sequential bills, still burning a hole through my conscience because I knew now that this wasn't just weird, this was dangerous. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I had a client meeting at 10 a.m. that I completely zoned out during, and they had to ask me 3 times if I'd heard their feedback on the branding concepts. I apologized, blamed it on not sleeping well, and promised to have revisions by Friday. As soon as they left, I pulled up the address again. 2247 Riverside Drive, storage facility, 7 p.m., 7 hours from now. I still hadn't decided if I was actually going to go. Part of me wanted to mail the money back to the bank with an anonymous note and pretend this had never happened. But another part of me, the part that had been sleepwalking through life for the past few years, working the same freelance gigs, living in the same small apartment, dating the same disappointing people on the same boring apps, that part of me wanted to know what this was about. That part of me wanted to help Alicia if she was in trouble. That part of me was tired of being irrelevant. At 6:30 p.m., I put the $5,000 in a backpack, got in my car, and started driving toward Riverside Drive. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if I wasn't so terrified. The storage facility was exactly what I'd expected. Rows of orange metal doors with unit numbers stenciled in black, a coded entry gate, and very few people around. I pulled up to the call box and realized I didn't have an access code. Before I could figure out what to do, the gate started rolling open on its own. Someone was watching. Someone had been waiting for me. I drove through slowly, following the unit numbers until I reached the section in the 2200s. Unit 2247 was at the end of a row, slightly separated from the others, with a small security light above it that barely worked, flickering in the growing darkness. I parked my car, grabbed my backpack, and walked toward the unit on legs that felt like they might give out at any second. The roll-up door was already open about a foot, just enough to see light inside. I bent down and looked under it, seeing what looked like a folding table and some chairs, nothing threatening. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "Come in," a woman's voice answered. Not Alicia's voice. Someone older, rougher. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to get back in my car and leave, but I'd come this far, and my cursed curiosity was stronger than my common sense. I lifted the door just enough to duck under and found myself in a storage unit that had been converted into some kind of makeshift office. There was a folding table covered in documents, 3 chairs, a laptop, and 2 women sitting there waiting for me. One was Alicia from the bank, looking exhausted and stressed, but no longer terrified. The other was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing glasses and a stern expression that reminded me of my high school principal. "Thank you for coming," Alicia said, standing up and gesturing to the empty chair. "I know this must seem insane, and I'm sorry for putting you in this position, but we didn't have any other choice." The older woman didn't stand or introduce herself. She just looked at me with sharp, assessing eyes. "Did anyone follow you here?" "I don't think so," I said, feeling stupid. I didn't really know what to look for. "Put your phone on the table," the older woman said. "Screen facing up." I did as she asked, and she pulled out a small device that looked like something from a spy movie, waving it over my phone before nodding in satisfaction. "Not tracked. That's good. Who are you?" I asked, finally finding some courage. "And why did you give me $5,000? Alicia sighed and sat back down. "My name is Alicia Westbrook. 3 months ago, my husband Kevin was killed at a construction site owned by Garrett Development. They're claiming it was an accident, but I know it wasn't. Kevin had been reporting safety violations for weeks, and they ignored him. When he threatened to go to OSHA himself, they fired him. 2 days later, they called him back, said they'd made a mistake, rehired him. 3 days after that, he was dead." The older woman picked up the story. "My name is Patricia Holland. I used to work as a safety inspector for the city. 15 years ago, I filed a report about multiple violations at a Garrett Development site. My report was buried. I was pressured to change my findings, and when I refused, I lost my job. 6 months later, my daughter was working as an accountant for a company that did business with Garrett Development. She found some financial irregularities and reported them to her supervisor. A week later, she died in a hit-and-run accident that was never solved. I felt my hands go numb. "You think the Garretts killed your daughter?" Patricia's expression didn't change. "I know they did, just like they killed Kevin Westbrook, just like they've killed or ruined anyone who's ever tried to expose what they're really doing. The Garrett family doesn't just build buildings. They run a systematic operation of fraud, bribery, and intimidation that's been going on for 3 decades, and anyone who gets in their way disappears." Alicia pulled out a folder from the pile on the table and opened it. "For the past 3 months, I've been gathering evidence for my wrongful death lawsuit, but I've also been finding evidence of something much bigger. Dylan Garrett has been coming into my bank regularly, and I've been watching him. He's been moving money around, large amounts, in ways that don't make sense for a legitimate construction business. I've been documenting everything, taking photos of his transaction records when he's not looking, copying account numbers." She pulled out a stack of papers covered in highlighted sections and handwritten notes. "The problem is, I can't just go to the police with this. The Garretts have half the police department on their payroll. I can't go to the FBI without more concrete proof, and I can't keep investigating without them noticing." That's where I came in, apparently. "Dylan Garrett has been getting more aggressive lately," Alicia continued. "He shows up at the bank right before closing, stands at my window for longer than necessary, asks personal questions about my kids. Yesterday, he told me he hopes my legal troubles get resolved quickly because it would be terrible if anything else tragic happened to my family. That's when I knew I needed to get this evidence out of my hands immediately." Patricia leaned forward. "We need someone who isn't connected to any of this. Someone the Garretts don't know about, who hasn't been part of the investigation, who can hold on to this evidence safely until we're ready to make our move." "The $5,000 is real money," Alicia said. "It's from my own savings. I'm paying you to hold on to this evidence for the next 3 days. After that, Patricia has a contact at a federal agency who's willing to listen. But we need to keep everything hidden until then. If the Garretts find out what we have, they'll destroy it, and probably us too." I looked at the folder on the table, then at these two women who were trusting me with something that could apparently get people killed. Why me? You don't even know me. Exactly, Patricia said. You're nobody. No offense, but you have no connection to the Garretts, no involvement in the construction industry, no family members in law enforcement. You're a random person who walked into a bank at the right time. That's what makes you perfect. They'll never see you coming. I sat there for a long moment, processing everything. This was insane. I should leave right now, give back the money, and pretend this conversation never happened. I should go home to my boring studio apartment and my freelance design work and my unremarkable life. But I kept thinking about Kevin Westbrook, about Patricia's daughter, about all the people the Garretts had hurt. What's in the folder? I asked. Alicia smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Everything. Bank records showing money laundering, emails from Dylan Garrett discussing bribes to city officials, evidence of code violations being covered up, testimony from construction workers who were threatened into silence, proof that the equipment that killed my husband had been deliberately sabotaged. If you're right about all of this, why hasn't anyone stopped them already? Because the Garretts are very good at making problems disappear, Patricia said. They've been doing this for 30 years. They know exactly how much to pay people, exactly who to threaten, exactly when to back off, and when to push harder. They've built an entire system of protection around themselves, but systems can be broken if you know where to strike. She pulled out a USB drive and set it on the table. Everything in this folder is on here, plus more. Audio recordings, video footage, bank statements, internal emails. 3 days from now, this goes to people who can actually do something with it. Until then, we need it to stay hidden. Can you do that? I picked up the USB drive. It was small, black, unassuming. It looked like the kind of thing I used to back up client files, not something that could bring down a corrupt family and possibly get me killed. What if they figure out I have this? What if Dylan Garrett shows up at my apartment? He won't, Alicia said. We've been careful. The security footage from the bank shows you depositing your check and leaving. Nothing unusual. The $5,000 was given to you under the counter. No cameras caught it. As far as anyone knows, you're just a regular customer. But you texted me yesterday. Someone could trace that. Patricia held up a phone. Burner phone. Untraceable. We're not amateurs. And we've been planning this for months. We just needed the right person to trust. And you showed up at exactly the right moment. I looked at the USB drive in my hand, then at the $5,000 in my backpack, then at these two women who were either incredibly brave or completely crazy, and I made the split-second decision that would change everything. Okay, I said, I'll do it. 3 days. Then this goes to your contact, and I'm out. Alicia's shoulders sagged with relief so profound that I realized how much pressure she'd been under. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to us. My kids, they've already lost their father. I can't let the people responsible just get away with it. Patricia was more businesslike, immediately shifting into instruction mode. Take the USB drive home. Don't plug it into anything connected to the internet. Don't tell anyone about this. Don't change your routine at all. Go to work. Go home. Act completely normal. In 3 days, we'll contact you with a location for the handoff. I put the USB drive in my pocket, feeling the weight of it like a stone. What happens after the handoff? Will I be involved in whatever comes next? No, Patricia said firmly. Once you give us the drive, your part in this is done. You walk away, keep the $5,000, and never have to think about the Garretts again. We'll handle the rest. That should have been reassuring, but something about the way she said it made me think the rest was going to be dangerous, maybe deadly. These women were going up against a family that had apparently killed multiple people to protect their secrets. Even with evidence, even with federal agencies involved, this was going to get messy. I stood up to leave, and Alicia hugged me, quick and tight. You're a good person, she said. We needed a good person. I left the storage unit and drove home in the dark, the USB drive in my pocket feeling heavier with every mile. I'd gone from being a nobody freelance designer to being the keeper of evidence in what was apparently a massive corruption case, and I had 3 days to keep it hidden. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I went to work, I met with clients, I revised logos and updated websites, all while feeling like everyone could somehow see the USB drive burning through my pocket. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up at 2 a.m., certain I'd heard someone trying to break in. By the third morning, I was exhausted and paranoid, jumping at every car that drove past my apartment, checking over my shoulder constantly when I walked to my car. My phone rang at 11 a.m. Unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. It's Patricia. The handoff is tonight. 9 p.m., same location as before. Bring the drive, keep the money, and walk away. It'll all be over in a few hours. Okay, I managed to say. Tonight, same place. She hung up without saying goodbye. I spent the rest of the day trying to calm my nerves and failing. I kept thinking about Alicia's kids, about Kevin Westbrook who died just for trying to make a construction site safer. I kept thinking about Patricia's daughter and the hit and run that was never solved. These weren't abstract news stories anymore. They were real people who'd been destroyed by a family that thought money and power put them above consequences. At 8:30 p.m., I put the USB drive in my pocket, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. That's when I saw the car parked across the street, a black SUV with tinted windows, engine running. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was someone visiting a neighbor. Maybe I was being paranoid after 3 days of stress and no sleep. But then the driver's door opened, and Dylan Garrett stepped out. He was wearing jeans and a casual jacket, looking nothing like the businessman I'd seen at the bank. He smiled when he saw me through my window, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes, and he started walking toward my building. I slammed my door shut and locked it, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my chest. How did he find me? How did he know I was involved? I grabbed my phone to call Patricia, but before I could dial, someone knocked on my door. 3 sharp raps, calm and patient. "I know you're in there." Dylan Garrett's voice came through the door. "I just want to talk. Open up." I pressed myself against the wall, trying to think. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, too high to jump. Only one exit, and Dylan was blocking it. My phone was in my hand, but who could I call? The police. Patricia had said half of them were on the Garrett payroll. 911? And say what? That a man was knocking on my door? "I'm not going to hurt you," Dylan called out, his voice reasonable and friendly. "I just want to have a conversation. I know Alicia Westbrook gave you something at the bank. I know you met with her and Patricia Holland. I know you think you're helping them, but you need to understand what you've gotten yourself involved in." He knew everything. Somehow, despite all their precautions, he'd figured it out. "Alicia Westbrook is not a grieving widow seeking justice," Dylan continued. "She's a disturbed woman who's been harassing my family for months because she can't accept that her husband's death was a tragic accident. Patricia Holland is a disgraced former city employee who's been obsessed with my family for 15 years. They've created an elaborate conspiracy theory, and they've dragged you into it." I didn't answer, didn't move. I just stood there, pressed against the wall, clutching my phone and the USB drive in my pocket. "The things they've told you, the evidence they've shown you, it's all fabricated," Dylan said. "Manipulated documents, taken out of context emails, lies built on lies. They're planning to go to the media with this nonsense, and they need a neutral witness to make it seem legitimate. That's why they picked you. You're a pawn in their game." He sounded so reasonable, so concerned. If I hadn't spent the past 3 days researching his family, hadn't seen the pattern of deaths and cover-ups, hadn't looked into Alicia's eyes and seen real terror, I might have believed him. "I'm going to leave my business card under your door," Dylan said. "I want you to call me, tomorrow, when you've had time to think clearly, when you're not influenced by those women. Call me, and I'll explain everything. I'll show you the real evidence, the truth about what happened to Kevin Westbrook. You deserve to know the truth." I heard paper sliding under my door, saw the corner of a business card appear on my carpet. "Think about it," Dylan said, "and think about this. Alicia and Patricia have been lying to you from the beginning. They don't care about you. They're using you. But I can protect you. I can make sure you don't get caught up in their legal troubles when this all falls apart." His footsteps retreated down the hallway. I heard the building's exterior door open and close. Through my window, I watched him get back in his SUV and drive away. I stood there for 5 full minutes, not moving, barely breathing. Then I called Patricia. "Dylan Garrett just showed up at my apartment. He knows about the USB drive. He knows about the meeting. He knows everything." There was a long pause. "Did you let him in?" "No. He talked to me through the door, left his business card, and left." "Good." Patricia's voice was steady, unshaken. "That's what we expected. He's trying to scare you, trying to make you doubt us. It means we're close to something that really threatens him." "How did he find me?" I demanded. "You said I was invisible, that there was no way they'd connect me to this." "I don't know," Patricia admitted. "But it doesn't change anything. The handoff is still on for tonight. Can you still make it?" I looked at the business card on my carpet. Dylan Garrett, Vice President of Operations, Garrett Development Corporation. A phone number in neat print. "What if he's telling the truth?" I asked. "What if you're wrong about all of this, and Kevin Westbrook really did die in an accident?" "My daughter was 28 years old," Patricia said, her voice hardening. "She was hit by a car and left to die on the side of the road 3 days after she reported financial irregularities at her company. The driver was never found. The police closed the investigation after 6 weeks. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And Kevin Westbrook is the same pattern. And if we don't stop them now, there will be more patterns, more deaths, more families destroyed." I picked up Dylan's business card and tore it in half. "I'll be there at 9 p.m. Same location." "Good. And from now until then, don't open your door for anyone. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. Just get to the storage facility, give us the drive, and this will all be over." She hung up. I sat on my couch, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Dylan Garrett had found me. Somehow, despite everything, he'd tracked me down, which meant nothing was safe, no one was anonymous, and the Garretts were even more dangerous than I'd thought. At 8:45 p.m., I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door again. This time I checked the street first. No black SUV, no cars with running engines, just a normal residential street on a normal evening. I practically ran to my car, got in, locked the doors, and started driving toward Riverside Drive. I kept checking my rearview mirror the entire way, expecting to see headlights following me, but the road behind me stayed empty. I pulled up to the storage facility at exactly 9 p.m. The gate was already open, waiting for me. I drove through and headed toward Unit 2247. The security light above it was still flickering, still barely illuminating the area, but something was wrong. The roll-up door was closed completely, and there were no lights on inside, no cars parked nearby, no sign of Alicia or Patricia. I parked and got out slowly, my instincts screaming that this was a trap. "Hello?" I called out, walking toward the unit. No answer. I tried to lift the door, but it was locked from the inside. I pulled out my phone to call Patricia, and that's when I heard it. Sirens. Multiple sirens, getting closer. 3 police cars came screaming into the storage facility, lights flashing, blocking my car in. Officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting at me to get on the ground. I dropped my phone and put my hands up, completely confused and terrified. "I didn't do anything," I shouted. "I'm just here to meet someone. On the ground. Now." I dropped to my knees, then lay flat on the cold pavement, my face pressed against the concrete. Officers surrounded me, one of them yanking my arms behind my back and cuffing me. "You have the right to remain silent," he started reciting, and my mind went blank. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. They pulled me up and started searching me, finding the USB drive in my pocket immediately. "Got it," one officer said, holding it up like a trophy. "This the evidence?" "Bag it," another officer said. They put me in the back of a police car, and I sat there numb, watching them search my vehicle. After about 10 minutes, a detective came and opened the door. "You want to tell me what you're doing here with stolen bank records?" "Stolen?" I managed to say. "No, Alicia Westbrook gave them to me. She's been investigating Garrett Development for..." Alicia Westbrook filed a police report 3 hours ago claiming someone stole confidential bank records from her workplace. The detective interrupted. "She named you specifically, said you'd been harassing her at work, asking questions about the Garrett family, and that she saw you access her computer when she went on break." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "That's not true. She gave me the USB drive. She and Patricia Holland, they asked me to hold on to evidence because..." "Patricia Holland?" The detective looked at his partner. "The woman who's been harassing the Garrett family for 15 years? The one with multiple restraining orders against her?" "She's not harassing them," I said desperately. "She's trying to expose corruption. Her daughter was killed. Kevin Westbrook was killed. The Garretts are respected members of this community who have been victims of a harassment campaign by mentally unstable individuals," the detective said firmly. "And now you've gotten yourself involved in it. Those bank records you're carrying, they're stolen property. That's a felony." I sat there in the back of the police car, handcuffed, my entire world crumbling. They'd set me up. Alicia, Patricia, all of it had been a setup. But why? What possible reason could they have? Unless Dylan Garrett had been telling the truth. Unless Alicia really was disturbed, Patricia really was obsessed, and I really had been their pawn. But then why had Alicia been so scared? Why had Dylan shown up at my apartment? Nothing made sense. They took me to the police station, put me in an interrogation room, and left me there for 2 hours. No phone call, no lawyer, just me and my racing thoughts and the growing realization that I'd ruined my life. When the detective finally came back, he had someone with him, Dylan Garrett. "This is the person?" Dylan asked, looking at me with what appeared to be genuine concern. "This is who Alicia Westbrook manipulated into stealing bank records?" "Apparently so," the detective said. Dylan sat down across from me, shaking his head. "I tried to warn you. I came to your apartment to explain what was really happening, but you wouldn't let me in. You knew," I said, my voice hollow. "You knew they were setting me up." "I suspected," Dylan said. "Patricia Holland has been trying to destroy my family for years. She's already cost us hundreds of thousands in legal fees defending against her baseless accusations. When I found out she'd gotten Alicia involved, and then saw Alicia talking to you at the bank, I put it together. I tried to stop you before you got in too deep, but..." He trailed off, looking genuinely sorry. "The USB drive in your pocket? It's full of fabricated documents. Bank records that have been altered, emails that never existed, audio recordings that have been edited to change context. Patricia Holland has been creating this evidence for years, always looking for the right opportunity to release it, and she needed someone like you, someone with no connections to any of this, to make it seem legitimate." I felt sick. "The $5,000, probably stolen," Dylan said. "Or money Patricia had been saving for years for this exact purpose. She needed to make it real enough that you'd believe it, commit to it. And it worked. You were the perfect victim." The detective leaned forward. "Here's where you are right now. You're in possession of stolen bank records. You can be charged with theft, potentially fraud, conspiracy. You're looking at serious prison time." "But I didn't know," I said desperately. "I thought I was helping someone. I thought..." "Ignorance isn't a defense," the detective said. "You took money. You took confidential documents. You were planning to distribute them. Those are crimes." Dylan held up a hand. "However, I've talked to my family's lawyers. We're willing to consider this a case of manipulation rather than malicious intent. If you cooperate fully, if you testify about exactly what Patricia Holland and Alicia Westbrook told you, if you help us build a case against them for harassment and fraud, then we can probably work something out. Maybe get you a deal where you serve minimal time, maybe even just probation. And if I don't cooperate," I asked, "then you take the fall for everything," the detective said. "And trust me, Patricia and Alicia will walk away clean. They've been careful. Everything points to you. You're the one caught with the stolen records. You're the one who'll go to prison." I sat there, trying to understand how my life had gone from normal to destroyed in just 3 days. I'd wanted to help. I'd wanted to be important, to matter, to do something good. Instead, I'd been used by people who didn't care about me at all. "I want a lawyer," I finally said. Dylan nodded approvingly. "Smart. Get a good one. Then we'll talk about your testimony." They let me make a phone call finally. I called my dad, woke him up at midnight, and tried to explain what had happened through tears. He said he'd find me a lawyer and be there first thing in the morning. They put me in a holding cell with 3 other people. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the hard bench and replayed everything in my mind, looking for the moment where I should have known better, should have walked away, should have not been so easily manipulated. Morning came. A lawyer showed up, a tired-looking woman my dad had somehow found through a friend. She listened to my story, took notes, and looked more concerned with every sentence. "This is complicated," she said finally. "The evidence against you is strong. You were caught with stolen property. You accepted money from someone. You participated in what the prosecution will call a conspiracy to defame a prominent family. Your best bet is probably to cooperate, testify against Holland and Westbrook, and hope for a deal." "What if they're telling the truth?" I asked. "What if Dylan Garrett really is corrupt, and I just helped him cover it up?" The lawyer sighed. "Then you'll need to prove it. But right now, You don't have any proof of anything except that you got manipulated into committing crimes. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of your situation. I spent that day going through the legal process. Arraignment, bail hearing, more interrogation. They set bail at $20,000, which my dad somehow managed to pay by using his house as collateral. I went home that evening, released but not free, facing charges that could send me to prison for years. My phone had dozens of missed calls, some from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the story, some from clients asking about projects I was supposed to be working on. I didn't call any of them back. I just sat in my apartment, the same apartment where Dylan Garrett had come to my door, and I tried to figure out what to do next. A text came through from an unknown number. I'm sorry, that was it. Just 2 words. I stared at it, wondering who it was from. Alicia? Patricia? Someone else entirely? I wrote back. Sorry for what? For setting me up? For ruining my life? No response. Days passed. My lawyer kept pushing me to take the deal to testify against Patricia and Alicia in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecutor was offering probation and community service if I cooperated fully. My dad begged me to take it, to just get this nightmare over with, but something kept nagging at me. Dylan Garrett had been too perfect, too reasonable, too concerned. The detective had been too quick to believe the Garrett family's version of events. Everything had fallen into place too neatly. And that text. I'm sorry. Why would Patricia or Alicia apologize after setting me up? Unless they hadn't set me up. Unless something else had happened. I started digging again, but this time more carefully. I used a library computer instead of my own. I searched for everything I could find about the Garrett family's legal history, and I found something interesting. 6 years ago, there had been another harassment case involving the Garrett family. A former employee named Thomas Wright had accused them of financial fraud and attempted to go to the media with evidence. He'd been arrested for theft of company documents. He'd been offered a deal to testify that he'd fabricated the evidence. He'd taken the deal, served probation, and then disappeared. I tracked down everything I could find about Thomas Wright. According to public records, he'd moved to another state, changed his name, and started over. I found a phone number through some aggressive searching and called it, expecting nothing. Hello? A man's voice answered. Is this Thomas Wright? Who's asking? My name's Sam. I was recently arrested for supposedly stealing documents related to the Garrett family. I was told you went through something similar 6 years ago. There was a long silence. Don't take the deal, Thomas finally said. Whatever they're offering you, don't take it. Why not? Because I took the deal. I testified that I'd made everything up, that the Garretts were innocent, that I was just a disgruntled employee, and a week after my probation ended, my house burned down. An electrical fire. I lost everything. Family photos, documents, proof of everything I'd found. And 2 days later, I got a phone call from someone who told me that was a warning. If I ever tried to talk about the Garretts again, the next fire wouldn't be my house, it would be me. My blood ran cold. So the evidence you had was real? Every word of it. Financial fraud, bribes, safety violations, all of it. But they're too powerful, too connected. They can make you disappear legally, or they can make you disappear permanently. Either way, you lose. Then what do I do? I asked desperately. I'm facing prison time. My lawyer says cooperation is my only option. Find someone who can't be bought, Thomas said. Someone outside their sphere of influence. Federal agents, investigative journalists from national papers. Someone big enough that the Garretts can't touch them. And be ready for it to get ugly, because they won't stop until you're destroyed or dead. He hung up. I sat in the library, my hands shaking. Thomas Wright had been right where I was now, had taken the deal, and had been terrorized for years anyway, which meant taking the deal wouldn't save me. It would just delay whatever the Garretts had planned. I needed to find Patricia and Alicia. If they hadn't set me up, if they'd been silenced or threatened into making false reports, then they were in danger too. And maybe, just maybe, the real evidence still existed somewhere. I went back to the storage facility that night. Unit 2247 was empty now, completely cleaned out. But I noticed something. The unit next to it, 2248, had a piece of paper taped to the door. I walked over and looked at it. It was a rental receipt dated 3 months ago, rented to someone named Patricia Holland. She'd had 2 units. The police had raided 2247, where I'd been caught, but maybe 2248 still had something. I tried the door. Locked. I looked around, saw no security cameras in this section, and made a decision that would either save me or condemn me further. I broke the lock using a crowbar I found in the maintenance shed. Inside Unit 2248 was everything. Boxes of documents, hard drives, USB drives, file folders, notebooks, years of investigation into the Garrett family, safety reports, financial records, witness statements, photographs. Everything Patricia and Alicia had told me about was real. I spent 6 hours in that unit, going through everything, taking photos with my phone, copying files to multiple drives. The evidence was overwhelming. The Garretts had been running a criminal enterprise for decades. Bribes to city officials, fraudulent safety inspections, money laundering, and deaths. 3 workers killed due to deliberate safety violations. Patricia's daughter killed in a hit and run after discovering financial fraud. Kevin Westbrook killed after reporting the same violations he'd been fired for earlier. But the most damning piece of evidence was at the bottom of one box. A recording. I played it on the old laptop Patricia had left there. It was a phone conversation between Dylan Garrett and someone else, discussing the Patricia Holland problem and the Westbrook situation. They talked casually about needing to neutralize both women before they could cause more trouble. They discussed the possibility of framing someone else for document theft to discredit any evidence that came out. They'd planned this. They'd known Patricia and Alicia were investigating, and they'd deliberately set me up as their fall guy. I copied everything to 3 separate drives, uploaded some to encrypted cloud storage, and left the unit. I needed to get this to someone who could actually do something with it. Not the local police, not anyone in the city, someone bigger. I contacted the FBI's field office 3 states away, sent them an encrypted email with samples of what I had. I contacted a journalist at the Washington Post who'd written about corporate corruption. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower cases, and then I waited. 2 days later, I got a response from the FBI. They wanted to meet. A week after that, they raided Garrett Development Corporation's headquarters. Within 3 weeks, Dylan Garrett and 4 other executives were arrested on charges of fraud, bribery, racketeering, and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The arrests made national news. The Garrett family empire crumbled. Patricia Holland and Alicia Westbrook came out of hiding, where they'd been since filing false police reports under duress. They'd been threatened, told their families would be killed if they didn't cooperate in discrediting me. They'd had no choice but to play along until they could find another way to get the evidence out. And that's exactly what they'd been trying to do when Dylan Garrett had figured it out and sprung his trap. The charges against me were dropped. The prosecutor apologized, said they'd been given false information by people they trusted. The story became a cautionary tale about corruption and the dangers of trusting local institutions that had been compromised. I testified at the trial. So did Patricia, Alicia, Thomas Wright, and 20 other people who'd been silenced or threatened by the Garrett family over the years. The trial lasted 8 months. In the end, Dylan Garrett was sentenced to 35 years in prison. His brother got 22 years. Their father got 15. 3 city officials went to prison. 2 police officers were fired and charged. The company was dissolved, its assets seized and distributed to the families of workers who'd been killed. Alicia settled her wrongful death lawsuit for $8 million. Patricia finally got justice for her daughter. Thomas Wright came out of hiding and testified about everything that had been done to him. And I became the person who'd accidentally brought down one of the most corrupt families in the city. I wish I could say it had a completely happy ending, but life isn't that simple. I lost most of my freelance clients during the trial. My name was in the news constantly, and not always in a good light. The Garrett family still had supporters who claimed they were being unfairly persecuted. I received death threats, had to move apartments twice, and spent months dealing with PTSD from the whole experience. But I also became friends with Patricia and Alicia. Real friends, not just people thrown together by circumstances. Patricia treated me like a daughter, always checking in to make sure I was okay. Alicia's kids called me Aunt Sam and drew me pictures that I put up in my new apartment. The $5,000 that started all this, I gave it back to Alicia. She'd taken it from her savings to pay me, and she needed it more than I did. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. The money from the rewards program the FBI had for information leading to corruption convictions was enough to cover my legal fees, and then some. I also got hired by a law firm that specialized in corporate investigations. Turns out, the person who brought down the Garretts looks good on a resume. I work now helping other people expose corruption, using the skills I accidentally developed while trying not to go to prison. Sometimes late at night, I think about that moment in the bank when Alicia slid that money across the counter and begged me to just take it and leave. I think about how easily I could have said no, could have insisted on staying, could have ruined everything before it started. And I think about Dylan Garrett's face when the FBI agents put him in handcuffs, the shock and outrage that someone as powerful as him could actually face consequences. I realize now that I wasn't chosen randomly. Patricia and Alicia had been watching the bank for weeks, waiting for the right person. Someone young enough to be idealistic, but old enough to be believed. Someone without connections who could slip under the Garrett's radar. Someone who came in regularly enough to not be suspicious, but not so regularly that they'd be remembered. I was exactly what they needed, and I just didn't know it yet. The bank teller passed me $5,000 in cash that wasn't mine and said, "Just take it and leave," and I did. And it changed everything.